So here we are back now in Matthew's gospel account of Jesus's life. And we are now winding down. We're in chapter 26, and this is part two. So the last message was part one of chapter 26. And we are leaving now the Passover dinner, the Last Supper, as it's called. And this is where Jesus was speaking with his disciples about what was going to happen to him. So, where we left off in chapter 26, Jesus said to them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." And that's when Peter said to him, "Well, even if all the other ones here fall away on account of you, I never will." I mean, he was adamant about the fact that he wouldn't fall away. He says, Jesus then said, "Truly I tell you, this very night, before the rooster crows, Peter, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter replied, "Even if I have to die for you, I will never deny you." And all the other disciples, they said the same thing. They were all just bound up with emotion, saying, "No, no, no, we will never, ever, even to the point of death, deny you." And yet Jesus just prophesied and said it was written, "I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock be scattered." Now it's interesting that Jesus really talks about the sheep of the flock. He doesn't say everyone in the crowd that's been following me. He clearly makes a delineation to those who are close to him, who are entrusted to him, who are his true disciples. So now we're moving back in to where Jesus picks it up, and it says, "At that time, Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he told them, 'Sit here while I go over there and pray.' He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed." So all of his disciples that were in the upper room with him came with him, except we know Judas didn't. And they came to Gethsemane with him. He went there to pray. And then from the crowd of his disciples, he asked Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee to come and be with him. He began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. He knew what was going to happen. And then he said to them, "My soul is consumed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." This is their rabbi, their teacher, their Lord, their Messiah, who they spent 3 years with, and they had just dined with, and he had just told them what was going to happen to him. And he says, "Stay here and keep watch with me." Now, before I go any further, we know that a few chapters ago, Jesus was telling us, those who are in the end times, those who are now somewhere down the road, to keep watch. And so as we go through this, think about the importance when Jesus says to keep watch, the importance that it has to him, of how we listen to those words, of his expectation, not just of his disciples here in Gethsemane, but of all of his disciples. So he says, "Keep watch with me." Going a little further, Jesus fell face down and he prayed, "My Father, it is just unbearing. And if it's possible at all, let this cup pass from me. I don't want to go through with this. I just, if there's any way, Father, then give me that way." But the next words that came out of his mouth, "Yet not as I will," not just because you have compassion for me, but as you will, I will do whatever. This is total submission, total obedience. Jesus is in agony to the point of death, he said, but you know what? Whatever you will, Father, I will do. What an example that he sets for us when he says that we are here to do his will and set our own will aside. This is what he was talking about. He illustrated it with his own life, even to the point of death, which is what his very disciples had said. That's how long we won't deny you, is even to the point of death. Then Jesus returned to his disciples and he found them sleeping. In all of this agony and all of this, well, their excuse probably, we just got done eating. Come on. What do you want us to do? It's nighttime. It's dark out here. I can't imagine the things that they were thinking in their minds to give as an excuse. And Jesus said, were you not able to keep watch with me for 1 hour? He'd only prayed for 1 hour. So he asked Peter, watch and pray so that you will not enter into temptation. This is the same message that we hear today for us. Watch and pray so that you will not enter into temptation. And the next words mean everything. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. A second time he went away and he prayed, my Father, if this cup cannot pass unless I drink it, may your will be done. Now you can hear a greater sense of submission. He's already made it known that he didn't want to do this. He's already made it known that he would do it if it was his Father's will. And now he says, hey, at this point, if this cup cannot pass unless I drink it, may your will be done. And then again, Jesus returned and he found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them and he went away once more. And he prayed a third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to his disciples and he said, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour is near and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of the sinners. Rise and let us go. He didn't run. He didn't freeze. No, here they come. Let's run. He was doing that will of the Father. He was surrendering himself like a lamb to the slaughter. And rise, let us go, he said. See, my betrayer is approaching. And while Jesus was still speaking, Judas, who was earlier that night with them around the table, one of the 12, arrived, accompanied by a large crowd armed with swords and clubs. They were sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer, Judas, had arranged a signal with them. The one that I kiss is the man. Arrest him. So Judas, going directly to Jesus, said, greetings, Rabbi, and he kissed him. He betrayed the Lord by walking up and kissing him. And what did Jesus say? You rotten scoundrel. No. He said, friend, do what you came for. Still surrendering to the will of the Father. Calling him friend. Then the men stepped forward. They seized Jesus and they arrested him. At this, one of Jesus' companions, who we now know as Peter, drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said. All who draw the sword will die by the sword. Are you not aware that I can call on my Father and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? Now, get this. He lives within us. He tells us that we shouldn't become combative, that if you draw your sword, you'll die by your sword. And he could have called those angels if it's his will us to fall under peril. Our hearts still need to persevere to the end and up to the point of death. This is what he's showing us right here. And he said, but how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way? At that time, Jesus said to the crowd, have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as you would an outlaw? Every day I sat teaching in the temple courts. You didn't arrest me then, but this has had all to happen so that the writings of the prophets would be fulfilled. Then all the disciples deserted him and fled, just like he said they would. They were puffed up when they were looking him in the eye and their adrenaline was up. But now, when their lives are on the line, oh my gosh, they might take me away and kill me tonight. They all deserted him and fled. Now, those who had arrested Jesus, they led him away to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest, where at that point the scribes and the elders had already gathered. But Peter, he followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. We know in the other gospel accounts tells us that John was there and John went in, and Peter didn't go in right away. But it says that he went in and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. So he was invited in to sit to find out. He wanted to find out what was happening to him. He was scared. He probably was wondering there was going to be retribution for cutting a dude's ear off. You know, knowing that this was a person who was in a position that could have really made life miserable for him. So he's just kind of sitting there. Now, the chief priest and the whole Sanhedrin, they were seeking false testimony against Jesus. Why? In order to put him to death. It was their whole vindictive heart condition to kill Jesus. But they didn't find anything. So many false witnesses came forward. They couldn't find anything. Finally, two came forward and declared, this man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days, which Jesus did say. And it says at that point, the high priest stood up and he asked him, have you no answer? What are these men testifying against you? But Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus answered, he said, well, you said it yourself. But I say to all of you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. More prophecy. After his death, burial, and resurrection and ascension, he sat at the right hand of the Father, and he will come back in the clouds of heaven. At this, the high priest tore his clothes and declared, he has blasphemed. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look, now you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? And they all said, he deserves to die. Then they spit in his face and they struck him. Others slapped him and they said, hey, prophesy to us, Christ, who hit you? Meanwhile, Peter was sitting in the courtyard and a servant girl came up to him. You also were with Jesus the Galilean. But he denied it before them all. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. And when Peter had gone out to the gateway, another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, this man, he was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again, no, he denied it with an oath. I don't know this man. And after a little while, those standing nearby came up to Peter. Surely, you are one of them, they said, for your sin gives you away. At this, he began to curse and swear to them, I do not know the man. He got vile. His human side came out in a big way. And immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word that Jesus had spoken. Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter went outside and he wept bitterly. And this is chapter 26 of Matthew's gospel account of what happened in the life of Jesus. Amen.